Hit Kickin' Country, Z94. Wild Bill in the midday, and joining us once again is none other than Daniel Horowitz from Red State. Daniel, thank you so much for stopping by South Georgia, my friend.
Hey, Bill, it's great to be with you again. It's been too long.
It's always too long when we talk. It seems like we don't talk enough, and there's so much going on right now. We've been following the news. Mike Lee and Ted Cruz have been leading the charge to defund Obamacare in the upcoming CR, which is a CR is a continuing resolution for those out there who are wondering what it is. Give people a heads up as far as where we're at in this process.
Absolutely. This is the 11th hour with Obamacare. As everyone knows, next year, 2014, is when all of Obama kicks in. That is when it gets implemented. And if we do not stop it now, we know history tells us that once an entitlement program is put into place, it is never rescinded. And that is why we're stuck with the $17 trillion in debt we have today and government involvement in almost every aspect of our lives. And if we want to get rid of it, it's got to be now. And it's got to be through the budget process. That is the only way to do it. So obviously every year the government has a funding mechanism in a budget bill, and the fiscal year expires September 30th. So in order for the government to continue funding beginning October 1st, they need to pass what's called a new CR, a new continuing resolution, to continue funding the federal government. And that is our opportunity to stand up and say, we will pass a bill that will fund every aspect of government, but not Obamacare. We will attach a law to the bill saying that it is prohibited to fund Obamacare, the mandate, the programs, the subsidies, the rules and regulations. Not one penny goes towards Obamacare. And if Democrats want to say, hey, we're going to shut down the government because we want to fund Obamacare and throw you off your health insurance and chase doctors out of the business, that's their prerogative. And let them suffer the loss for that. But we need to focus like a laser beam the next 2 months over Obamacare, making the case against it and explaining why it must be defunded now. And that's going to come down all in late September.
Latest Gallup poll has President Obama at 41%, and if you look at polling on Obamacare, it's very, very unpopular. You would think this would be a sure winner for the GOP. Why are there so many GOP senators and congressmen out there, particularly Georgia congressmen and senators, that are not jumping on this?
Well, as we know, the GOP is called the stupid party for a reason. I mean, not only are many of the establishment leaders unprincipled on policy, they really don't get politics too well either. As you just mentioned, Obamacare is extremely unpopular. It's actually become more so just because even Democrats had to admit implementation is going to be a train wreck. It's not ready for prime time, even if you believe in it. And additionally, the entire, the whole IRS scandal has really blown a hole in Obamacare because the IRS will take the lead in enforcing it. And people are like, wait a minute, I don't want this political organization, that's persecuting people for political beliefs. I don't want them, overseeing Obamacare. So we really have tailwinds blowing at our back to go and take this down. This is not making a fight over Medicare or Social Security, which is obviously more popular with the public. This is something where the public sides with us, and for some reason, GOP leadership cannot take yes for an answer. The people are like, we want to get rid of this. I've met so many people, especially some elderly and seniors. They're not even conservative or Republican, or most of them are kind of apolitical, but they're all saying you got to get rid of this. And this is a prime opportunity. Another interesting point is that if you take a look at the 2014 landscape, the midterm elections, it's all going to be fought on red state territory. Republicans have the opportunity to win back the Senate, all in seats that Romney carried by a significant margin in most cases. And Obamacare is it's really unpopular in these states. Why wouldn't Republicans want to make Obamacare the centerpiece of the election, make that a full-blown fight in September, and let the Democrats shut the government down to fund Obamacare? We're not going to shut it down, and that's a problem with Republicans in messaging. They're sabotaging the conservative effort by going out to the media and saying, well, we don't want to shut the government down, and that's not a good thing. Well, stop talking about shutting the government down and start talking about defunding Obamacare. ultimately, if the Democrats don't go along with that and the government shuts down, it will be their fault. But with Republican leaders talking about a government shutdown, so they make it a self-fulfilling prophecy when they say, we're going to get hurt if the government shuts down. Well, yeah, if you continue talking about that instead of making Obamacare the issue, then maybe you will get hurt. And one other point, you hear from a lot of the conservative intelligentsia inside of Washington and some of these establishment Republicans that, well, remember what happened in the mid-'90s with Newt Gingrich? We really got clobbered for the government shutdown then. Do you remember from the past? And these guys want to repeat the same mistakes. And that's, if you think about it for a couple of moments, it's kind of revisionist history. In what way did Republicans lose out from that? They actually gained seats in the midterm elections in '96 there. And you know, Bill, I don't think anyone's going to say that Bob Dole lost the election back then because of the government shutdown.
Right. There's definitely more problems because
of Bob Dole.
Yep.
That had nothing to do with that.
You know, the last continuing resolution, we've had a few Georgia senators and congressmen who voted to fund Obamacare. In the Senate particularly, where do Chambliss and Isaacson stand right now? Do we know what they're going to do?
You know, I haven't seen anything from them this time around, but they have always voted for the CR with funding for Obamacare. They will never take a lead on that. And obviously this year Georgia has an opportunity to move at least one of those seats into the principled constitutional conservative category by electing, you know, someone who's going to be, you know, much better than him. And I would imagine almost all the candidates that are vying for the seat will be better than Saxby Chambliss. But I mean, the problem with Chambliss and Isaacson is that they're bought and paid for by GOP leadership. They will never dissent from them, never stand up with, you know, conservatives like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee. It is all about playing the Washington game. And the Washington game is that you don't want to do anything drastic. Obamacare was already passed. Let's let it go through. And there will be a promise some year down the road that will maybe make some minor tweaks to Obamacare. And we'll be talking about Obamacare 10 years from now the same way we talk about Medicare now, which is obviously, you know, it's here to stay, and maybe we'll make some minor tweaks to it. You know, Ted Cruz and Mike Lee, they're saying, no, we're going to change the rules of the game. This is something that cannot stand. It is, policy-wise, it is terribly harmful. 1/6 of our economy, and possibly the most important part of our economy, is going to be completely taken over by the government, and the public is with us politically. It makes no sense not to have a fight to the death over Obamacare in September.
In our district here in South Georgia, John Barrow is getting a lot of pressure to vote to defund Obamacare. He has yet to go on the record to do so. He is putting together some symbolic votes about possibly a vote where the IRS will not be involved in implementing Obamacare, but it is a symbolic vote. I was wondering if you could touch on briefly for our listeners out there about symbolic votes and how they have been used to deceive Georgia voters in particular.
Sure. I mean, symbolic votes are kind of like political human shield, wherein, you know, politicians are able to hide behind show votes that they know to begin with are inconsequential and will not go anywhere, and then they'll overlook the one consequential means of ending Obamacare, which is having a fight to the death in the budget battle and refusing to fund it. Because, look, we all know that, obviously, for any legislation to pass, to overturn the law statutorily, it has to pass through both the House and Senate and get signed into law by the president. So when people like John Barrow go around saying, well, we'll chip away, we'll maybe get rid of the IRS involvement, well, that's going to take a new law, and Obama would never sign it, and he knows that. But he'll get to have his show vote, go back to his district and say, yeah, I'm not like the rest of the Democrats there. I'm a conservative Democrat because I oppose Obamacare. Well, really, you oppose Obamacare, so then are you willing to do the only thing that it takes to get rid of it, which is to pass a funding bill that does not contain any funding for Obamacare? Because that is something, and particularly in John Barrow's case, I think this is very poignant because James Madison laid out in Federalist 58 the differences between the House and the Senate. And one thing he was particularly fond about, the way he structured the Constitution in our form of government, is that the House had control over the purse strings. and he held that power to be enormous. And he was referring specifically to these situations where statutorily, we don't have control of all of government. But Republicans do have control over the House of Representatives, and all spending bills have to originate there. So, Obama and Harry Reid in the Senate and all the Democrats, they need the House to pass a funding bill for Obamacare in order for this to go through. If they don't want it to go through, it won't go through. So for someone like John Barrow to say he opposes Obamacare but not to sign on to the effort to defund, that's completely disingenuous. And as we've all learned over the last few years, there's really no such thing as a conservative Democrat anymore.
Daniel Horowitz, it's always great talking to you from redstate.com. People need to get on the phone. They need to call their congressmen. They need to call their senators. They need to show up at town meetings and let them know exactly what they think needs to happen with Obamacare.